Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
If you were listening to one of our more recent podcasts, I did 16 podcasts at RE Plus, and Laura Ward, Ph.D., she's got a Ph.D. in electrical engineering, which makes her a doctor, was on the podcast, and we talked for about 25 minutes about grid forming inverters. And we wanted to kind of follow up and talk more. I had to run and jump on an airplane. In fact, I actually missed my plane that day because there was a huge line at the airport over there in Las Vegas. But anyway, There's probably listeners here right now that were in that same line as I was. So welcome back, Laura.
Yeah, Sean, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And so I'm excited for this time with you again.
Great. And so maybe what you could do is tell us a little bit about what you're up to. So you do have a PhD in electrical engineering. You live in Washington, D.C., and you do a lot of work for Texas. And so what have you been up to lately?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So I have been working on different topics since I finished my PhD in electrical engineering at Texas Tech University. I'm currently supporting an F4DC. And so I have been involved in different projects as well, supporting the Department of Energy, and also everything, have been related to new technologies with grid forming inverters and the models that we need to, specify for the control of them in order to stabilize the grid in a better way, and also to provide some capabilities as well, such as the Blackstar capability.
Great. And it looks like you're working for PNNL, so that's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory?
Yes, I have experience, I had the opportunity to support them, and at PNNL, I was working with the PR100. That was a project to work related to the 100% energy transition with renewable energy resources in Puerto Rico. I actually am a survivor from the Hurricane Maria in 2017, and I had the honor to support, the island from this PR100 project. I was able to work with the analysis and modeling team, and we were actually working in some, models and analysis of the transmission and distribution system for the 78 municipalities. And so actually there is a publication related to that, and two different versions in English and in Spanish as well. And since the time I had been focused on it, so I had the honor as well to continue working with my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation related to forming inverters. And a good news that I have is that 2 weeks ago, the Western Electricity Consortium Council, they actually approved the new standards for the models of this technology, and PSSC and other, important software. With these libraries, we can continue advancing on the implementation of this technology in different areas in the United States, and also, that can support the efforts in other countries as well.
Okay, so are you from Puerto Rico?
I'm from Colombia, but I had the opportunity to study in Puerto Rico. And in 2017, I was there when, Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma crossed the island. And so that was a hard situation that I was living, but I was resilient, and I continued working on my personal goals. And at the same time, I built this resilience to continue supporting the growth from my knowledge and from my new perspective that was, coming to me after the Hurricane Maria. And so I really love the island, and I have been supporting United States, and also, territories of United States such as Puerto Rico.
So what was it like in 2017 during and after that hurricane? And then you're helping with grid forming inverters, and you mentioned something about 100% renewables for Puerto Rico?
Yeah, so the PR100 is a project actually is advocate to include 100% renewable energy resources around the island in urban areas and in rural areas. And the main idea was to evaluate the situation of the transmission system at the time and the distribution system using some data from Luma, which is the utility. And we were able to actually implement as well some models for the inverters. At the time, I was able to support that team, the analysis and modeling team, and also another team that was working with some models at the time. I'm talking about, 2022. But yeah, so basically, after Hurricane Maria, the island was suffering a hard situation because pretty much the entire island was without electricity during a long time. Some areas were more vulnerable to the situation. In that case, I was able to interview some rural municipalities in August 2018, so around a year after Hurricane Maria, and still they were living a hard situation because they were short of electricity that 24 hours per day. Some of them, some days or some hours during a day, they were using a lot of generators, synchronous generators, and we know that, the consumption of fossil fuels increased drastically at the time. And the new perspective from stakeholders and researchers during the situation was to extend the reliability and the resilience of the power system. That allowed me to, work on my experience technically and also with new ideas. And at the same time, so in 2018, I had the opportunity to work directly with ASU, Arizona State University, when we were addressing from the Center of Energy and Sustainability some projects. That's why, I built my experience with mixed research, quantity and quality research, because the quality part of the research was related to some interviews with different stakeholders from hospitals and also people from the communities. They provide a perspective of how is living without electricity after, you were used to live in that normal situation.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
Yeah, so Laura, I was going to ask you too, so you got your experience a lot, or it seems like you perhaps even were inspired by a hurricane. Do you think that if you were not there during that hurricane, would you not be working on grid forming inverters?
Well, I think everything has a purpose in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Like, were you planning on working on grid forming inverters before you moved there? Or were you already working with grid forming inverters when that hurricane happened? Or is it something after the hurricane?
Yeah, this is a good question, John, because actually at that time I was focused on resilience framework and I was focused on renewable energy resources. But grid forming inverters at the time, in 2017, I didn't hear this concept yet.
Yeah, it was
After
very new.
Hurricane
It's such a
Maria.
new thing that even in the United States, it's not big. In some places with a higher penetration of renewables, it's a lot bigger. And then, as you mentioned, Puerto Rico going for 100% renewables. And if you ask a lot of people, even a lot of people in the renewable energy industry, they're kind of brainwashed. And they'll tell you like, oh no, we can't do 100% renewables. We need to have at least some natural gas or something like that. But we can easily have 100% renewable energy, all inverter based, if we just use grid forming inverters. So maybe what you could do too is to tell us how that would work and how a grid forming inverter will make it so Puerto Rico or even United States or the biggest country in the world can work without having these big spinning things, how the grid forming inverters can duplicate and even perhaps improve upon these big spinning resources.
Yeah, so it's so true, that after Hurricane Maria, so many research become very important, not for the island, but also for United States and other countries. And it was a lesson learned. And actually, my first experience with reforming inverters was in 2020 when I was directly part of a research sponsored by the Department of Energy. It was the autonomous inverters without communication, and also, I was able to support from Texas Tech, a team that was focused on that. And that's why there are so many publications related to the topic, because I was directly working with the behavior of these inverters and different level of distribution systems. So I was working directly on the scalability of these inverters.
The scalability, okay.
The scalability, yes, the scalability is actually, the framework in which we can start with 1, 2, 3. So in my case, I start with 3 forming inverters into a distribution system. We call the IEEE 123. Then I was able to scale, this technology, and we were able to insert 60 inverters in a distribution system. We call the distribution system or that test feeder K1 from EPRI actually, and it has around 600 electrical nodes. I was able to insert 60, then finally 120 reforming inverters in the distribution system, and analyze the behavior of them, the functionalities of this technology in the distribution system, show us, different level of stability. And according to the IEEE 1547 2018, we were able to validate the functionality of this technology at that level of scalability in the distribution system, evaluating the frequency, the voltage, and also a black start capability, which is the ability to restore the system even when there is no power in the main system. Because these grid-forming inverters I was mentioning in the previous podcast mimic synchronous machines, which is very important for the inertia effect. And yeah, so since that time, I started to work directly on grid forming inverters. When I was in Puerto Rico, no, I was working directly on other framework of the renewable energy resources. And also this technology can support as well, even batteries. So we can insert, these inverters to work very well with batteries. And then I was able to start a research in Texas Tech University, sponsored by the DOEE, by the Department of Energy, with Sinden, which is a company that actually has a commercial system right now. And then, yeah, so I have been supporting so many studies, actually in Siemens as well. I have been supporting some analysis of transmission system as well. And also, thinking on this technology. So far, we have in United States the following inverters, but in the future, we really need this technology that can support not just the grid, but also the decarbonization, which is really important. And now with a new vision, the DOEE, where I'm supporting with some ideas and working with other stakeholders, is very relevant.
And so DOEE, that's like Washington, D.C. based, right? It's for the
Yes.
District of Columbia. And what is it? Department of Energy and the Environment? Is that what it stands for?
Yes.
Yeah, I
that's
was
right.
teaching classes that was through a DOEE program for grid alternatives over there in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. So that was pretty awesome. So about, grid forming inverters, And I think it's just so new and it's hard for a lot of people to understand because it's like the policy hasn't even really caught up. Like I imagine probably in a lot of places in the United States, if you installed one, it might even violate the rules because they just don't have the policy for this technology. I first learned about it when I was teaching a class over in Australia, and they're really big on it because they have such a great concentration of solar, and they call them IBRs or inverter-based resources, and they don't want one inverter turning off and causing a chain reaction. So that when one inverter turns off, the other one has to sort of compensate for it. And then you were mentioning inertia too, and I was thinking about that, and it's like when you talk about inertia physically, it's like they say an object in motion wants to stay in motion, something like that from your physics class. And so you have these big old power plants that are spinning big heavy pieces of metal, and they're in motion and they want to stay in motion. And then you have something like a fault on a grid, like a couple of wires crossing each other, or you have something turning off or on all at once, or somebody hits a telephone pole and that would, create wires shorting out and all that kind of stuff. And so without that inertia, you can have things go too far out of range, and then inverters have to shut off when they're out of range, and it can create a big chain reaction. And so it's kind of the opposite of what people in the industry have called anti-islanding. Anti-islanding is something that we have like for grid tie inverters on our house. And if the frequency or voltage is outside of a certain range, they have to turn off because we can't have a grid that's completely off and then be sending some power from one person's house and shocking alignment and stuff like that. But there's a lot of resources on the grid. And so we have that inertia, but I guess there's a lot more to it than just inertia, right? Like with a grid forming inverter. So maybe you could also talk about how it works with voltage regulation, frequency regulation, reactive power, power factor, and all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So the great thing of this technology, grid-forming inverters, is that they can support ancillary services. They can enable ancillary services. When we are talking ancillary services, it means voltage, frequency, and black star capability.
And I guess those are things that people can sell to the grid too. Like it's a service, the ancillary service is a service that somebody that has a big energy storage plant can sell to the grid.
Yeah, so the grid frequency stability with the mass integration of the grid forming inverters up to like 100% must be, studied with the simulations, because actually that can help people to get or to see high penetration of solar, in the electrical grid, which is actually is a service, because finally what people is buying, is the electricity directly in their houses. This electricity need to be stable in order to keep safe, all the devices that we normally use in our houses. So when we are buying electricity, so intrinsically we are buying, frequency and voltage, but everything needs to be stable. So these inverters can synchronize autonomously, can be synchronized autonomously with the grid, and also can actually support the grid with some levels of active and reactive power, which is actually the magnitudes that can regulate the frequency and the voltage. There are some specific ranges. So, for example, in this case, with grid-forming inverters, in grid-following inverters, the active power in this case need to be able to regulate the voltage in that way that the voltage can be between 0.95 per unit and also 1.05 volts, per unit. Also, the frequency need to be between, plus or minus 0.05%. So in that case, it's really important to be focused on the standard, the IEEE standard 1547-2018, because this is the standard that established these levels to keep the grid stable.
Do you work on that standard? Are you on the committee that helps make that standard?
So we are using already the standard, because the last version of the standard was of the in 2018.
Oh, I
We
see.
are
Yeah.
going to have a future, update in 2028.
2028. So every 10 years later, it seems like we should be doing it a lot faster because it's so important and things change really fast. I mean, if you look at the amount of solar and storage and inverters on the grid between 2018 and 2028, what is there, like 8 or 10 times more solar on the grid at those times, or more inverters on the grid? So it seems really important to make these standards. What's the name of the standard, by the way?
IEEE 1547, 2018 for the interconnection and operability of, DERs, distributed energy resources.
Okay. Great.
This
Okay.
is the whole main, of the standard. There are other standards as well and updates related to other aspects. But yeah, that actually involves cybersecurity, which is really important for this technology as well, because there are some attacks, that can work in a bad way for the stability of the grid. So all these aspects are very important for the main grid, and the main idea is to keep the grid safe, and on time with these specifications.
Okay. Great. So let's see. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover today?
Well, there is a research question really important is, can the PV penetration level increase in large scale distribution systems for grid modernization using microgrids with solar reforming inverters? The answer is yes. If we are able to modeling of feeders and warrant the adoption of these distributed energy resources, we can actually increase the penetration levels up to 100% and also warrant the grid faults. Currently, I'm working on it because DC, for example, Washington, DC, they are ongoing with this standard. Other states already adopt the standard, Puerto Rico as well. So the main idea, for DC is to have the adoption of this standard and continue working with the present inverters that they have. In this case, are the following inverters, but even these following inverters need to be aligned with this standard, IEEE standard, and also we can improve the interconnection of microgrids and total distribution system as well, which is really important because when we are talking about the grid forming inverters, we can think that they are going to be able to be installed in a microgrid that can work in island mode or grid connected, which is really important to support even the commercial, this residential sector, as the commercial and the industrial sector. In the future, we know the data centers, are accelerating the development in this country, and also with artificial intelligence as well. We really are going to see a power demand bigger than what we have
Great.
now, and we need to be ready for that. So 2 weeks ago, when we hear the WIC was able to approve these models and softwares that are supporting the analysis and the behavior of these devices and for the entire grid, it's really good because we are going to see even more the importance of this new technology, which is part of the next generation of power electronics supporting the grid to, make the grid dynamic, participative, and also, advance in this new infrastructure that we need. Because before, or so far, we had critical infrastructure due to the power demand that is, more relevant now and in the future.
Great. Great.
Yeah. So this is actually, a summary of general perspective.
So where can people find you? I guess we could put your LinkedIn in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. So people can find me in LinkedIn as Laura Ward, Ph.D. And also I have there a website where you can find me on Instagram as well. And I have some publications in the OSTI website, which is part of the Office in Scientific Research. So basically,
Great.
this is a good resource and also in the ERKit. So
Great. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for being on the podcast. And thanks for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To find out more, go to SolarSEAN.com and get yourself NABCEP certified, and you will be making your own IEEE standards in no time, right, Laura?